Hi guys, thank you all for tuning in and welcome back to Sewing Clara. In today's video, we're going to be discussing how to prepare for a sewing project. So just like with any kind of other projects that you might be preparing, it's always great to have some kind of a list of things to do. And once you checked all the things that were on your list, you will be more confident, you will know that you are well prepared, and you can start your project pretty much stress-free. And that is my overall goal. I want you guys to feel that no matter how complex the project that you are planning is going to be, that you're gonna feel like you can do anything. And remember, every single seamstress in the world, no matter how skilled they are, they all started with the basics, just like you are doing right now. So let's jump right into this. So the way I plan my sewing projects is following. There are 4 main points that I focus on. The first point is my skills. The second point is the pattern. The third point is materials and sewing supplies. And the fourth point is the time element. So let's start with point number 1, and that is the skills that you need for a particular project. It does not always necessarily mean that you have to be able to do everything that the project requires. You can be learning by doing. So let's say you want to make a simple gift bag with a zipper and you have never sewn in a zipper on a sewing machine, but you already know how to do the straight stitch and how to work with a zigzag. Well, that's good enough. There are several things you can do. You can read up on several blogs, or you can look through the videos on this platform. You can also go on YouTube and see what is out there. You can compare several tutorials and see what you think would work the best for you. And you can simply learn while working on the project. So if you look at a certain project and you feel like, okay, there is one skill I haven't tried out yet, don't let that discourage you. You can still try that and you can still learn while working on something special. Now, the second point, sewing patterns. So there will be always certain projects that you will be working on for which you will need a particular sewing pattern, usually for complex projects, like let's say a fitted dress or some traditional dress or a jacket or a coat. Then there will be easier projects, let's say tank tops, shirt dresses. These will be the projects for which you will be very often able to use some kind of a generic pattern that you can simply adjust to your needs. Then there will be projects for which you'll be able to draft your own pattern, and for certain projects you won't need a sewing pattern at all. Let's say you plan on making a simple drawstring bag. There's no need for a pattern. All you need is to have the correct measurements for the rectangle that you will cut out of the fabric. Whenever you will need a particular sewing pattern, there are multiple possibilities how to get your pattern. So either you get a pattern that you can download and print and then copy yourself. So that would be, for example, a pattern that you can get on this platform in the pattern shop, or you can go ahead and find something on Etsy or Burda. So you find your pattern, you print it out. It's gonna be on a regular printer paper. You will have to put all the pieces together, kind of like a puzzle, according to the marks on the pattern, and you will have to tape it together. And once you have your pattern sheets, you will grab a sewing pattern paper, which will look something like this. It's a thin paper that's kind of a see-through, and that will help you to copy your sewing pattern. So this is what the paper looks like when I unfold it. And the thing you have to do is to copy your sewing pattern in your size or in the size that you need. And whenever you are unsure whether one or the other size is going to fit, I recommend to upsize, because it's always easier to take the things in than vice versa. The next option is to simply buy a sewing magazine, something like this. So this is an old issue of Burda magazine. There are multiple pieces featured, and the magazine has this section in the back with all the patterns for all the pieces that were featured in this magazine. And there are several pattern sheets with multiple patterns on them in different sizes. So again, I would have to go ahead and copy the pattern I need in the size I need. So I would again need the pattern paper. And whenever I copied a pattern, I like to keep my patterns organized. So I always keep them in various envelopes depending on the size of the pattern, so they can be a little bit smaller or bigger. And I like also making little sketches or drawings of the piece that the patterns are for. And whenever necessary, I also like making notes. So let's say I get a pattern from a certain magazine that I still have at home. I always like writing the name of the magazine and the issue and also the number of the pattern and the size on the envelope. And whenever there's something that I feel is important, let's say the yardage, then I will write it down also on the envelope, because it just makes life much easier and I don't always have to go ahead and look for the magazine and go through the pages in order to find all the info that I simply put on the envelope. And this way my patterns are always really well organized. Another option is to buy a sewing pattern for a single piece, so that can look something like this. So I have here this pattern for a costume. So there are pattern sheets with this costume in several sizes. So all I have to do is to go through the sizing table and pick the size for myself, and then I can go ahead and grab the pattern paper and copy my sewing pattern. So that's very convenient because there is just one pattern and it's a little bit less confusing than the sheets from the magazines where you have multiple patterns on one pattern sheet. Now, I also mentioned that sometimes you can grab a certain pattern and simply adjust it to your needs for your particular sewing project. So let's say you want to make a skirt, but you want to make it longer. There's no need to draft a new pattern for that. You just simply take the pattern that you know fits and you make only the length adjustments. I find that whenever I'm working with a certain sewing pattern and whenever I'm making more complex adjustments, it's better to again grab my sewing pattern paper and to make a new draft with the adjustments, because that way I will make sure that I don't forget something. So that's the next option. And if you want to copy a simple piece that you have at home, all you have to do is to spread the piece as flat as possible, either on a table or on the floor, and you will put your pattern paper on it and you will copy the outlines, and then you can mark the seam allowances and cut out the pattern. That's also a possibility. You will learn all of that during this course later. For the projects that do not necessarily require a pattern at all, where I will be working with a simple rectangle where knowing the measurements will do, or where I'm going to be working with a circle, I will not always make a pattern draft, but I do recommend it because it's just so much easier. And especially if you know you're going to be making the piece again, it's always nice to already have the pattern because you don't have to make anything from scratch on your fabric. That being said, especially if it's rectangles, if you're working with a fabric like this that's checked, sometimes it's really super easy to simply measure the size of the rectangle and to account for the seam allowance. So you will not necessarily always need it, but it is still a nice thing to do. And especially in the beginning, it will give you a little bit more sense of security because you will already have the correct size and the correct shape, and it's just very easy to simply place it on the fabric and to pin it and to cut it out. Alright, so let's say you already know what skills you need for your sewing project and you know you're confident in your abilities, or maybe there is just one little thing that you are about to learn. You figured out the pattern situation. The next thing you want to think through are all the materials and all the sewing supplies that you will need. So let's start with the materials. So if you are planning a pretty simple project, like let's say a drawstring bag or a jersey tank top, there won't be that many materials that you will have to prepare. So I don't think it's always necessary to make a list of things you will need. So I'm actually just about to make a few drawstring bags for soap nuts, because that's what I like using for washing our laundry. So I have here this checked pattern, and I have here this cord, and these are all the materials I will need. I already ironed the fabric, which is something I like doing because it's easier than to work with. And there is nothing else I have to worry about when it comes to the materials for the piece itself. For the tank top, all I would need would be the jersey, and that would be it. However, if you are planning something more complex like a purse or a jacket or a coat, I do recommend making a list of all the things you need, especially if you will have sections that will need an iron-on interfacing, zippers, press buttons, and I don't know, like belt buckles, whatnot. It's always good to make a list. Also, if these things that you're about to use will have to have certain sizes, write down the sizes so that when you go to a sewing supply store, that you can get everything you need and that you won't have to return. Even if you are shopping online, it's always good to have a list where you can simply cross the things that you already have for your project. Once you figure that all out, you will have to focus on the sewing supplies and tools. So the first thing you will need is a yarn. In the course Basics and Hand Stitching is a video number 4 that focuses on sewing yarns, and I also recommend watching the video number 5 about the sewing supplies you need, because some of the things might be the things that you will need for your sewing project. So you will most likely need pins. I like keeping my pins in this box. You will of course need proper scissors. Sometimes it's good to have also small scissors that will help you to open stitches whenever something goes wrong. So these are the things you will need pretty much all the time, and the rest will depend on the type of your project. So once you figured out what you all need in order to be able to cut out the fabric and prepare all the pieces, I do recommend putting everything together in one place so that you don't have to interrupt your work whenever you start doing certain things. In the case that you would need the extra materials that I mentioned before, like for example iron-on interfacing or buttons or zippers or something else, it is also always great to prepare everything together with your fabric so that everything is in one place, because it will definitely help you to relax before you go on with your project. And the last point you will have to think about is going to be your time schedule, which will always depend on the type and the complexity of the upcoming sewing project. So if you plan on making something super simple, and maybe even something for which you won't need a pattern, it might be something for an afternoon. But for some projects, you will have to account for even a few afternoons. In general, I do recommend splitting your project into short sub-projects for the sake of your back and for the sake of your neck. I personally don't like sewing longer than 3 to 4 hours a day, because then I end up having back pain. First, you will always account the time that you will need in order to have your pattern ready. Whether you have to copy it or draft it or, I don't know, buy it somewhere and there will be some delivery time, that's the time you have to account for. The next time that you have to account for will be the time you will need in order to get all your materials, the extras and the sewing supplies. Now let's pretend you have all these things ready. So if I'm working on something like a tissue hoodie or a drawstring bag or a tank top or a simple shirt, that will be usually just an afternoon project. But especially if you are a beginner, it might take a little bit longer for you, because we all have different learning curves, and it's all about improving our skills, getting more experience and practicing. So even if certain things that seem like it takes other people less effort and less time, even if these things will take a little bit longer for you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I recommend doing things in your own time, the way you feel confident. And you will see that over time, as you improve your skills and as you get more experience, it will get easier and you will most likely get a little bit faster. When it comes to the more complex projects, let's say when I'm working on a purse, on a coat or a button-down shirt or a skirt with lining, that's something that I like splitting into kind of little sub-projects. So on the first day, I would simply get all my stuff ready and I will cut out the pieces of the fabric and, if necessary, of the interfacing, and I would go ahead and iron on the iron-on interfacing if that's part of the project. And if there would be some sections with some special details like inside pockets or decorative zippers, I would already prepare everything for that, and then I would leave it at that, and I would continue the next day. And depending on whether the project is super complex, whether I'm using also lining or maybe even I have to hand stitch something on, then I might need one extra day. Estimating that might be a little bit tough at the beginning, especially if you don't have much experience, but you will see over time, as you make more and more pieces, it will be easier to plan your schedule. I have a day job, so I usually plan these projects for my weekends. So I usually start working on early Saturday afternoon, unless I already had some time on Friday in the afternoon, and then I usually finish on Sunday afternoon. Unless it's something super complex, then I will continue working on the following weekend. I simply like taking my time. I don't personally like planning super quick and stressful projects because I usually then end up messing things up and I usually end up redoing certain things, and that frustrates me. Maybe it's not gonna be an issue for you, but I in general recommend trying to schedule your projects, if possible, as stress-free as possible. I'm gonna give you certain time estimations for things that I make regularly. So a tank top is for me something I can finish within 2 hours if I take my time. If I make underwear, that's something I finish within an hour if I already have the pattern and all the things at home. For things like a skirt or a simple dress, I will need an entire afternoon. When it's a button-down shirt, that's something I already like to split in 2 afternoons for the sake of my neck and for the sake of my back. I made myself once a winter coat, and for that I needed several afternoons. I think it ended up being like 6 afternoons. And it was usually about 3 to 4 hours on average that I needed on each day. When I'm making leggings for myself, that's again an afternoon project. Jeans, usually something I would finish in 2 days because I simply like taking my time. So overall, I definitely recommend making a list with these points and checking all these points before every single sewing project. It is going to make you feel like you are in control, you're gonna feel like you're well organized, and it's gonna take away some stress. It's also going to help you to plan things easier. And especially at the beginning, you can also go ahead and write down how long you worked on certain things, and you can compare it with similar projects in future, because that can also help you with planning when it comes to your time schedule. And that is going to be it for today's video. I hope that this video has been helpful for you. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy sewing!